The research station floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a planet that most species considered too dangerous to visit. Velthar was a world of predators, where even the smallest creatures could kill an unprepared traveler. The station itself was massive, built by the Galactic Council to study the wildlife below. Hundreds of alien species worked there, but humans were still new to the station. Hana stood in Captain Jiwoo's office, her uniform perfectly pressed and her posture straight. She had been with the elite guard for 3 years and never received a single complaint. Jiwoo looked at her with tired eyes. He had been dealing with council bureaucrats all morning. "They want you in the containment wing," Jiwoo said. "Xenobiology section. You'll be guarding some specimens they brought up from the surface." Hana nodded. "What kind of specimens, sir?" Jiwoo pulled up a holographic display. 3 small creatures appeared in the air between them. They looked like a mixture of a big cat and something reptilian, with dark scales and sharp teeth. Even as juveniles, they looked deadly. "Ravenclaw cubs," Jiwoo explained. "Their mother was killed 2 weeks ago during a territorial fight with another predator. The scientists want to study them before releasing them back to the wild. The problem is, these things have already killed 2 researchers who got too close." Hana studied the image carefully. The cubs were small now, maybe the size of a large dog, but she could see the muscle beneath their scales and the intelligence in their eyes. "Why do they need a human guard?" she asked. Jiwoo smiled without humor. "Because everyone else is too scared. The Krillax won't go near them. The Thross scientists can study them from a distance, but nobody wants guard duty. The council decided that since humans are predators too, maybe we'd be better suited for the job." "I understand, sir. There are strict protocols, Hana. You maintain distance at all times. No interaction beyond basic observation. Feeding is done through automated systems. The scientists don't want anyone forming attachments or getting hurt." Jiwoo looked at her seriously. "These creatures are dangerous. Don't forget that." "Yes, sir." The xenobiology wing was in the lower levels of the station, where the gravity was slightly heavier and the air was cooler. Hana reported for duty the next morning and met Dr. Velnas, the head scientist. He was a Thross, a reptilian species known for their analytical minds and cold logic. Dr. Velnas looked Hana up and down with his horizontal pupils. "Another human," he said, his voice carrying a hissing quality. "I expressed my concerns to the council, but they insist your species is suitable for this task." "I'll follow all protocols, Doctor," Hana said calmly. "See that you do. The specimens are valuable for research. We cannot afford to lose them because of human sentimentality." He gestured toward a large reinforced window. "They are in there. Containment Chamber 7. Hana approached the window and looked inside. The chamber was large, designed to simulate the rocky terrain of Velthar. In the center, huddled together, were the 3 cubs. They were bigger than she expected, almost the size of adult humans. Their scales were dark gray with streaks of black, and their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. As she watched, one of the cubs lifted its head and looked directly at her. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass. The cub didn't snarl or show aggression. It just looked at her with an expression that seemed almost curious. "They are designated R1, R2, and R3, Dr. Velnas said from behind her. "We do not name them. They are research subjects, nothing more." Hana spent the first week simply observing. She learned the cubs' patterns. R1 was the largest and most aggressive, often pushing the others away from food. R2 was cautious, always checking the environment before moving. R3 was the smallest and spent most of the time staying close to the others. The automated feeding system dropped nutrient pellets into the chamber 3 times a day. The pellets were designed to provide complete nutrition for Veltharian predators, but Hana noticed that the cubs didn't seem enthusiastic about them. They ate because they were hungry, not because they enjoyed it. On her 8th day, Hana noticed something concerning. The feeding system dispensed the usual amount of pellets, but it seemed like less than before. She checked the system logs and frowned. The amount was correct according to the program, but watching the cubs fight over the food told her something different. She reported it to Dr. Velnas. "The system is functioning within parameters," he said dismissively. "The cubs are growing, which means they will always appear hungry. We cannot overfeed them, or they will become dependent on captivity." "But they're juveniles," Hana said. "They're still growing. Shouldn't they get more food as they grow?" Dr. Velnas clicked his jaw in irritation. "The system was designed by experts. It provides adequate nutrition. Your job is to guard them, not to question scientific protocols. Hana returned to her post, but the concern didn't leave her. Over the next few days, she watched more carefully. The cubs were definitely hungry. They finished every pellet and then searched the chamber for more. R3, the smallest, was getting thinner. When feeding time came, R1 and R2 would take most of the food, leaving R3 with very little. On the 12th day, Hana made a decision. She waited until her shift was late and the other personnel had gone to their quarters. Then she opened her own ration pack and approached the containment field. The field allowed small objects to pass through under controlled conditions. She tossed a piece of protein bar through the field. It landed near R3, who jumped back in surprise. The cub sniffed it cautiously, then ate it quickly. The other cubs noticed and came closer, but Hana was careful to give each of them something. It became a routine. Every shift, Hana would supplement the automated feeding with portions of her own food. She had to be careful. If she gave them too much, Dr. Wellness would notice the change in their behavior or weight. If she gave them too little, it wouldn't help. The cubs began to recognize her. When she approached the window, they would come closer instead of hiding in the rocks. R3 especially seemed to wait for her. Hana told herself she was just correcting a problem with the feeding system. She was ensuring the specimens remained healthy. It was good security work, nothing more. But deep down, she knew the truth. When she looked at those 3 cubs, orphaned and scared and hungry, she didn't see research specimens. She saw children who needed help, and Hana couldn't walk away from that, no matter what the protocols said. 3 weeks had passed since Hana started her assignment in the containment wing. She had lost weight, though she tried to hide it under her uniform. Every meal she received, she calculated how much she could spare for the cubs. Breakfast was split in half. Lunch became a few bites and whatever could fit in her pockets. Dinner was often skipped entirely. The cubs were growing stronger. R3 no longer looked so thin. The little one had started to play again, pouncing on shadows and wrestling with R2. R1 was less aggressive during feeding time, probably because there was finally enough food to go around. Hana watched them through the window and felt a quiet satisfaction that made the constant hunger worth it. But she wasn't as careful as she thought. Tae-hyun was another human soldier on the station, assigned to patrol the upper decks. He and Hana had gone through training together back on Earth. When he saw her in the cafeteria one morning, he immediately noticed something was wrong. "You look terrible," he said, sitting down across from her with his breakfast tray. Hana forced a smile. "Thanks. You always know how to compliment someone." "I'm serious, Hana. When was the last time you had a full meal?" He looked at her plate. She had taken only a small portion of rice and some vegetables. "That's not enough food for someone on active duty. I'm fine. Just not very hungry lately." Tae-hyun frowned but didn't push further. He knew Hana well enough to recognize when she didn't want to talk. But his concern didn't go away. Over the next few days, he started paying more attention. He noticed how Hana's uniform hung looser than before. He saw the dark circles under her eyes. He watched her push food around her plate without eating. Meanwhile, Dr. Wellness had noticed changes too, but his concerns were different. The cubs were thriving beyond expectations. They were gaining weight, showing improved behavior, and their aggression levels had decreased significantly. It didn't match the data from the feeding system. He reviewed the security footage from the containment chamber. What he saw made his scales bristle with confusion and then anger. There was Hana, night after night, feeding the cubs by hand through the barrier field. She would talk to them softly, words the recording couldn't quite pick up. The cubs would come to her without fear, eating from her hand like domesticated animals. Dr. Wellness brought the footage to Commander Crix, the Krillax who ran the station. Crix watched with his compound eyes, antennae twitching in agitation. "This is highly irregular," Crix said, his voice clicking and buzzing. "The human is violating multiple protocols, hand-feeding dangerous predators, forming emotional attachments. This cannot continue. I recommend her immediate removal from the assignment," Dr. Wellness added. "Her behavior is unpredictable and potentially dangerous." Crix summoned Hana to his office the next day. She stood at attention while he displayed the security footage on his wall screens. She didn't deny what she had done. "You were given explicit instructions," Crix said. "No direct contact with the specimens. No deviation from automated feeding protocols. You have violated both directives. The feeding system isn't providing enough nutrition, Hana said calmly. The cubs are juveniles. They need more food than the system is giving them. The system was calibrated by experts, Dr. Wellness interjected. It provides precisely the correct amount of nutrition. For an adult, maybe, Hana replied. But they're children. Growing children need more food. Crix's antennae waved in confusion. Children? They are predatory animals. Dangerous specimens. Why do you refer to them as children? Hana struggled to find words that would make sense to them. How could she explain something that felt so obvious to her? They're young. They're vulnerable. They lost their mother. They need someone to care for them. They are research subjects, Dr. Wellness said coldly. They do not need care beyond basic survival requirements. Crix studied Hana with his alien eyes. You will cease all direct interaction with the specimens immediately. The automated feeding system will remain unchanged. If you cannot follow these directives, you will be removed from this assignment. Do you understand? Hana wanted to argue, but she knew it would be useless. These species didn't understand. They couldn't understand. Yes, Commander. She returned to her post, but everything felt wrong now. She watched the cubs through the window and saw how they came to the glass looking for her. When the automated system dropped the inadequate amount of food, she saw them fight over it again. R3 was pushed aside by the bigger cubs, getting only scraps. Hana lasted 2 days following the new orders. On the third day, she brought her lunch to the containment wing and fed it to the cubs through the barrier field when no one was watching. She knew there were cameras. She knew she would probably be caught again. But she couldn't stop herself. That evening, Taehyun cornered her in the corridor outside her quarters. I talked to the kitchen staff, he said without preamble. You've been taking your ration allocations but barely eating anything in the cafeteria. Where's all that food going? Hana leaned against the wall, suddenly feeling very tired. It's complicated. Try me. She explained about the cubs, the feeding system, the protocols. Taehyun listened without interrupting. So you're starving yourself to feed alien predators, he said when she finished. I'm not starving. I'm just eating less. Hana, look at yourself. You've lost at least 10 kilograms. Your hands are shaking. When was the last time you felt strong enough to run a full training drill? She didn't answer because they both knew the truth. She hadn't been able to complete a full drill in over a week. Her body was running on empty, sustained by stubbornness and whatever scraps she allowed herself. You need to stop this, Taehyun said. Let me talk to Captain Jiwoo. We can file a formal complaint about the feeding system. I already tried. They don't care. To them, the cubs are just specimens. They don't understand why it matters if they're hungry. Taehyun grabbed her shoulders gently, then let them be hungry. You can't save everyone, Hana, especially not at the cost of your own health. But Hana couldn't accept that. When she closed her eyes, she saw R3's thin body and hungry eyes. She saw all 3 cubs huddled together in their containment chamber, orphans in a strange place with no one who cared if they suffered. They're just kids, she whispered. Someone has to care. Taehyun looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. You're going to get yourself killed over this. Maybe, but I can't stop. He left her there in the corridor, and Hana returned to her quarters alone. She had 1 ration bar left from today's allocation. She broke it in half. 1 half went into her pocket for the cubs tomorrow. The other half she ate slowly, trying to make it last, trying to convince her empty stomach that it was enough. It wasn't enough. It hadn't been enough for weeks. But the cubs needed her, and Hana had never been good at walking away from those who needed help. Hana's shift started at 600 hours, same as always. She pulled on her uniform and tried to ignore how loose it felt around her waist. The face in the mirror looked hollow, with shadows under the eyes and cheekbones that stood out too sharply. She splashed cold water on her face and told herself she was fine. Just 1 more day. She could manage 1 more day. The station corridors were quiet this early in the morning. Most of the alien crew members operated on different sleep schedules, so Hana had the hallways mostly to herself. She appreciated the solitude. It meant fewer people asking questions about why she looked so tired. She had saved half of yesterday's dinner for the cubs. The food was cold now, stored in a sealed container in her pocket. As she walked toward the containment wing, she mentally divided it into 3 portions. R1 would try to take more than his share, so she would need to distract him while R2 and R3 ate. She had become good at managing their feeding time. The corridor seemed longer than usual. Hana's legs felt heavy. each step requiring more effort than it should. She paused at a junction, one hand against the wall to steady herself. The world tilted slightly, then righted itself. She took a deep breath and continued walking. Just one more day. The containment wing entrance required a security code. Hana's fingers fumbled with the keypad, missing the numbers twice before getting it right. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Cool air washed over her face, and she stepped inside. The cubs were already awake. They recognized the sound of the door and came to the window immediately. R3 pressed against the glass, leaving fog marks with his breath. Hana smiled despite her exhaustion. At least they were healthy. At least her sacrifice had been worth something. She walked toward the containment chamber, but the floor suddenly felt unstable beneath her feet. The walls seemed to pulse and breathe. Hana blinked hard, trying to clear her vision. She needed to feed the cubs. That was important. She couldn't forget that. Her hand reached into her pocket for the food container. The motion made her dizzy. The floor rushed up to meet her, and Hana realized with distant surprise that she was falling. She tried to catch herself, but her arms wouldn't respond properly. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was R3's face through the glass, eyes wide with what almost looked like concern. Then nothing. So-min, the station's human medical officer, was in her quarters when the emergency alert came through. A security sensor had detected a person down in the xenobiology wing. She grabbed her medical kit and ran, her heart pounding. The station was dangerous enough without someone getting hurt in the containment areas. She found Hana crumpled on the floor outside Containment Chamber 7. For a terrible moment, So-min thought she was dead. Then she saw the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Medical Emergency Xenobiology Wing, So-min said into her communicator. I need a stretcher and emergency transport to the medical bay immediately. She knelt beside Hana and began her assessment. Pulse was rapid and weak. Skin was cold and clammy. Eyes were unresponsive. So-min pulled out a scanner and ran it over Hana's body. What she saw made her swear under her breath. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, dangerously low blood sugar, multiple vitamin deficiencies. Hana's body was in the early stages of shutdown, trying to survive on resources that simply weren't there. How long has she been like this? So-min muttered to herself. Why didn't anyone notice? Behind the containment glass, the three cubs were going crazy. They paced and scratched at the barrier, making distressed sounds that So-min had never heard before. R3 was the most agitated, pressing against the glass so hard it seemed like he might break through. The medical team arrived with a stretcher. As they loaded Hana onto it, So-min noticed something fall from her pocket. A sealed container with food inside. She picked it up and examined it. Standard station rations, the kind given to all personnel. Why would she have uneaten food in her pocket? One of the medical technicians asked. So-min looked at the container, then at the cubs still thrashing in their chamber, then back at Hana's emaciated form. Understanding clicked into place, and it made her feel sick. She was feeding them, So-min said quietly. She was feeding the cubs her own food. They transported Hana to the medical bay and got her stabilized on intravenous fluids and nutrients. So-min contacted Captain Jiwoo immediately. He arrived within minutes, still in his sleep clothes, his face drawn with worry. What happened? He demanded. So-min showed him the medical scans. She's been starving herself probably for weeks. Her body finally gave out. Another few days and we might not have been able to save her. But why? Her ration allocation is the same as everyone else's. Check the security logs, So-min suggested. I think you'll find the answer in the containment wing. Jiwoo pulled up the footage on the medical bay computer. He watched in silence as weeks of recordings played out. Hana sneaking food to the cubs. Hana skipping meals. Hana growing thinner and weaker while the cubs grew stronger and healthier. When the recordings ended, Jiwoo sat back in his chair and rubbed his face. She sacrificed herself for them, he said, for research specimens, for predators that could kill her without thinking twice. Commander Crix arrived shortly after, followed by Dr. Velness and several other senior staff members. They crowded into the medical bay conference room while Hana remained unconscious in the next room. This is exactly the kind of irrational behavior I warned about, Dr. Velness said. Humans are too emotional, too prone to forming inappropriate attachments. She nearly died, Crix added, his antennae quivering. For what purpose? The specimens would have survived on their programmed rations. Her sacrifice achieved nothing. It achieved everything, So-min said sharply. Look at the cubs' health reports. They're thriving. Their behavior has improved dramatically. They're developing better than any specimen in the program's history. Because a human starved herself to feed them, Dr. Velnus countered. That is not sustainable. That is not rational. That is not acceptable procedure. Captain Jiwoo stood up slowly. You want to know what's not rational? A galaxy that doesn't understand the concept of protecting children. Any children. Even children of another species. They are not children, Crix insisted. They are dangerous predators. They're both, Jiwoo said. And Hana understood that. She saw what none of you could see. In the medical bay, Hana's vital signs suddenly spiked. So-min rushed back to her bedside. Hana was still unconscious, but her heart rate had jumped and her breathing had become labored. The monitors showed signs of distress. From the containment wing, distant but still audible through the station's walls, came a sound that made everyone stop talking. The cubs were screaming. It was a high-pitched, desperate sound that carried through the corridors. They had never made such a noise before. So Min looked at the monitors, then at the security feed showing the cubs in their chamber. R3 was throwing himself against the barrier field. R1 and R2 were circling frantically, their distress calls echoing through the xenobiology wing. They know. Somin said softly. Somehow they know she's hurt. She pulled up the audio controls and played a recording through the medical bay speakers. It was Hana's voice, captured from the security footage, talking softly to the cubs during feeding time. In her hospital bed, Hana's vital signs began to stabilize. In the containment chamber, the cubs stopped screaming and pressed against the glass, listening. The alien staff members looked at each other with confusion and growing understanding. Something was happening here that none of them had anticipated. Something that didn't fit into their research protocols or scientific models. A human had chosen to suffer for creatures that weren't even her species, and those creatures had bonded with her in return, creating a connection that transcended predator and prey. It was the most human thing any of them had ever witnessed, and they had no idea what to do with it. 3 days after her collapse, Hana woke up in the medical bay. The first thing she noticed was the IV line in her arm and the steady beep of monitors. The second thing was Captain Jiwoo sitting in a chair beside her bed, looking like he hadn't slept much. "Welcome back," he said quietly. Hana tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Jiwoo handed her a cup of water and she drank slowly. "The cubs," she finally managed to say. "Are they okay?" Jiwoo's expression shifted between frustration and something that might have been admiration. "That's your first question? After nearly dying? Are they okay?" Hana repeated. "They're fine. More than fine. They've been fed properly for the past 3 days. He leaned forward. "What I need to know is why, Hana. Why did you do this to yourself?" Hana looked at the ceiling, trying to find words for something that felt too obvious to explain. "They were hungry. They're children. Children eat first. They're dangerous predators." "They're both," Hana said, echoing what Jiwoo himself had told the alien staff. "And someone needed to care for them. That's not protocol. That's just humanity." Jiwoo was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up and moved to the window. "The council wants to discuss your case. They're trying to understand what happened. I told them I'd explain, but I'm not sure I can make them understand something that's so instinctive to us." "What do you mean?" "Come to the conference room tomorrow. If you're strong enough, I think you need to hear this conversation." The next day, Somin cleared Hana for limited activity. Hana still felt weak, but she could walk without assistance. She made her way to the conference room, where the alien leadership had gathered. Commander Crix, Dr. Velnus, and several other species representatives were present, along with Jiwoo and a handful of other human crew members. Hana took a seat and immediately felt the weight of multiple alien eyes studying her. "We are attempting to understand the incident," Commander Crix began, his translator rendering his clicks and buzzes into standard language. "Your actions were clearly detrimental to your own survival, yet you persisted despite warnings. We need to understand if this represents a psychological deficiency that affects all humans, or if this was an isolated incident." Before Hana could respond, Jiwoo activated a large display screen. "I'd like to show you something," he said. "These are historical records from Earth." The screen filled with images and video clips from human history. Soldiers sharing rations with orphaned children during wars. Parents going hungry to feed their offspring during famines. Communities coming together to protect and nurture the young during disasters. The examples came from every continent, every culture, every period of human history. This is not an isolated incident, Jiwoo explained. This is humanity. We are biologically programmed to protect and nurture children, not just our own children. Any children? Dr. Velness's scales rippled with confusion, but the specimens are not human children. They are not even the same species. They pose a potential threat to human life. That doesn't matter to us, said Daehyun, another human soldier who had joined the meeting. Our brains don't make that distinction very well. We see something young and vulnerable and our instincts kick in. We want to protect it. We want to feed it. We want to keep it safe. The screen changed to show images of humans with domesticated animals, dogs, cats, even wild animals that had been rescued and rehabilitated. Thousands of years ago, we took wolves, apex predators that could kill us, and we turned them into dogs, Jiwoo continued. We did it by caring for their young, by feeding them, by forming bonds with them. This isn't weakness. This is one of our greatest strengths. Commander Crix's antennae twitched rapidly, a sign of deep thought in his species. My people do not have this instinct. Our young are independent from hatching. We provide no parental care. The weak die and the strong survive. The Thros are similar, Dr. Velness added. We lay eggs and leave them. Those that hatch successfully join the community. Those that do not are part of the natural cycle. The concept of sacrificing personal resources for unrelated juveniles is foreign to us. But that's the point, Hana said, speaking for the first time. All eyes turned to her. You see the cubs as research subjects, as specimens, as predators. But when I look at them, I see 3 children who lost their mother. I see scared, hungry babies who need someone to care. I can't turn that off. None of us can. She looked around the room at the alien faces, trying to understand. Every human in this room would have done the same thing I did. Maybe not as extremely, but we all would have found a way to make sure those cubs had enough food. It's not a choice. It's what we are. Taehyun nodded. She's right. When I found out what Hana was doing, my first instinct wasn't to report her. It was to figure out how I could help. The only reason I didn't was because she wouldn't let me. A new voice spoke up. It was Ambassador Relkan, a species representative visiting from the Galactic Council. I have been reviewing human military records, Relkan said, his 6 eyes blinking independently. Human soldiers and coalition forces show unusual behavior patterns. They will risk their lives to protect wounded allies of other species. They form protective formations around non-combatants during evacuations. They share supplies with civilian populations even when it depletes their own resources. We thought these were strategic decisions, Relkan continued, calculated moves to build alliances and maintain cooperation. But now I am beginning to understand. This is not strategy. This is instinct. Dr. Velness was reviewing data on his portable screen. If this is accurate, then human behavior in the Cubs case was predictable. Guard Hana did not malfunction. She operated according to her species' biological programming. Which means, Commander Crix said slowly, that assigning humans to guard juvenile specimens without accounting for this instinct was our error, not hers. The room fell silent as the implications settled over everyone. Finally, Ambassador Relkan spoke again. The Galactic Council has misunderstood humanity, he said. We saw you as predators. We classified you as a dangerous species because of your history of warfare and your position at the top of your planet's food chain. But we missed something crucial. What's that? Jiwoo asked. You are predators who care for the young, predators who will starve themselves to feed orphans, predators who form bonds across species lines. Relkan's eyes all focused on Hana. In all my years serving the Council, I have never encountered a species with this combination of traits. You are unique in the galaxy. Dr. Velness closed his screen. I owe you an apology, Guard Hana. I called your behavior irrational. I said you were emotionally compromised. But you were simply being human. I did not understand what that meant. Hana felt tears prick at her eyes, though she tried to hide it. I just wanted them to have enough food. You gave them more than food, Commander Crix said. You gave them care, attention, what humans call love. And they responded to it. The Cubs' behavioral improvements are unprecedented in our research. They are calmer, healthier, and more socially adjusted than any specimens we have studied. Because someone finally treated them like children instead of subjects, Somin added. Ambassador Relkan stood up, his multiple limbs moving in a gesture of formal decision. I will be reporting this incident to the Galactic Council. not as a disciplinary matter, but as a revelation about human capabilities. The galaxy needs to understand what humanity brings to our coalition. He looked directly at Hana. You did not break protocol out of weakness. You followed a deeper protocol, one written into every human cell. The galaxy called your species predators, and they were correct, but they did not understand that you are predators who protect the vulnerable, even when it costs you everything. Hana didn't know what to say to that, so she simply nodded. Around the room, she could see understanding dawning on alien faces. They were beginning to see humanity not as a collection of individuals, but as a pattern that repeated itself across history and cultures, a pattern that defined what it meant to be human. And at the center of that pattern was one simple truth. Children eat first. 2 weeks after the incident, the research station looked the same, but everything had changed. Hana walked through the corridors with a nutritionist following close behind. Her name was Yoonji, a human specialist brought in specifically to ensure Hana maintained proper health while continuing her work with the cubs. You need to eat this entire meal, Yoonji said firmly, holding up a detailed nutrition plan on her tablet. No sharing. No skipping. Your body is still recovering, Hana smiled slightly. I understand. I'm serious, Hana. The station has implemented new protocols. The cubs have their own enhanced feeding schedule now. You don't need to sacrifice your meals anymore. It was true. The containment wing had been transformed. The automated feeding system had been completely overhauled. With input from human specialists who understood juvenile predator nutrition, the cubs now received meals calibrated for growing bodies, with portions that increased as they developed. Dr. Velnas had personally supervised the changes, determined to correct what he now recognized as a significant oversight. But more than the feeding schedule had changed. Hana's assignment had been officially modified. She was no longer just a guard. Her new title was Interspecies Care Specialist, a position created specifically for her. The protocols that had forbidden interaction with the specimens were rewritten. Now supervised contact was not only allowed but encouraged. Hana entered the containment wing and found Dr. Velnas waiting for her. The Thros scientist had been spending more time observing her interactions with the cubs, taking extensive notes. Good morning, Guard Hana, he said, then corrected himself. Apologies. Specialist Hana. Hana is fine, Doctor. He gestured toward the observation window. The specimens are waiting for you. Their behavior changes significantly when you arrive. Their stress hormones decrease by 43%. Their social bonding indicators increase by 68%. It is remarkable. Through the glass, Hana could see all 3 cubs pressed against the barrier. R3 was making a soft chirping sound that the translators couldn't quite interpret. She had learned it meant he was happy. How long until their release? Hana asked. 2 more weeks. They are nearly full-grown now, ready to survive on Velthar independently. We have identified a suitable territory for them, away from established predator zones but with adequate resources. Hana felt a pang in her chest. She had known this day would come, but that didn't make it easier. They'll be okay on their own? That is what concerns me, Dr. Velnas admitted. They have bonded with you in a way we did not anticipate. Releasing them may cause significant psychological distress. To them or to me? Hana asked quietly. Both, I suspect. The release was scheduled for early morning when the planet's surface was coolest. A transport ship would carry the cubs down to their new territory and monitor them for several days to ensure they adapted properly. Hana was given permission to accompany the mission. On the day of the release, she stood in the transport bay while the cubs were loaded into specialized containment units. They didn't fight or resist. When Hana spoke to them, they calmed immediately, trusting her even in this strange situation. Captain Jiwoo came to see them off. Are you ready for this? No, Hana admitted, but it's the right thing to do. They belong on their homeworld, not in a research station. You gave them a chance to get there safely. Without you, they probably wouldn't have survived long enough for release. The transport flight took 3 hours. Hana sat near the containment units, watching the cubs through the transparent walls. R3 kept his eyes on her the whole time. R1 and R2 were more interested in the view as they descended through Velthar's atmosphere. The landing site was a rocky valley surrounded by cliffs, with a water source nearby and plenty of cover. The research team had confirmed no major predators controlled this territory. It was perfect for 3 young Ravenclaws starting their independent lives. The containment units were opened remotely. The cubs cautiously stepped out onto the native soil of their home planet for the first time since they were brought to the station. They looked around with wide eyes, taking in the smells and sounds of Velthar. Hana stepped out of the transport against protocol, but with permission from Dr. Velnus. She needed to say goodbye properly. The cubs came to her immediately. R3 pushed his large head against her side, nearly knocking her over. R1 and R2 circled around her, their version of affection. For a few minutes, Hana just stood there with them, memorizing this moment. "You're going to be fine," she told them softly. "This is your home. You're strong enough now. You can take care of yourselves." R3 made that chirping sound again, but this time it sounded sad. "I know," Hana whispered. "I'll miss you too." She stepped back toward the transport. The cubs watched but didn't follow. They understood somehow that this was the way things had to be. As the transport lifted off, Hana watched through the window as the three cubs stood together in the valley, watching her leave. For the first week after release, the monitoring drones reported that the cubs stayed close to the landing site. They hunted successfully, catching smaller predators and establishing their territory. But every day they would return to the spot where Hana had said goodbye, as if waiting for her to come back. Then something unexpected happened. The cubs began expanding their territory, but not randomly. They moved closer to the research station, establishing a range that encompassed the area around the facility. Any hostile wildlife that approached the station's perimeter was driven away by three increasingly large and powerful ravenclaws. "They are protecting the station," Dr. Velna said in amazement, watching the drone footage. "They have created a defensive buffer zone around our facility." "They're protecting Hana," Captain Jiwoo corrected. "Or at least the place they associate with her." The discovery sent ripples through the Galactic Council. A species known for being impossible to control had voluntarily taken on a protective role, all because of a bond formed with a human. Ambassador Relkan returned to the station with several council members to observe the phenomenon directly. "This changes everything," Relkan said, watching the cubs patrol their territory on the monitors. "For decades, we have tried to establish safe research stations on high predator worlds. We always fail because we cannot defend against the local wildlife. But humanity has shown us another way. We don't just fight predators," Jiwoo said. "We raise them. We heal them. We earn their loyalty." Commander Crix's antennae waved in his species' version of excitement. "I am formally requesting additional human personnel for the station, specifically for what you call empathy-based security operations." Over the following weeks, the Galactic Council began recruiting humans for specialized roles across multiple worlds. Orphaned predator rehabilitation programs were established on 6 different planets, all staffed primarily by humans. The results were remarkable. Species that had been considered too dangerous to study were successfully raised and released, often forming protective relationships with the research facilities that had cared for them. Hana received commendations from both Earth's military command and the Galactic Council. She was offered positions on multiple worlds, but she chose to stay on the Velthar station. The cubs were here after all, even if they were free now. 3 months after the release, Hana was eating lunch in the station cafeteria. Yoonji sat across from her, monitoring her meal like always. "Full plate, I see," Yoonji said approvingly. "No sneaking food away?" "No sneaking food away," Hana confirmed. "The cubs have more than they need now." Taehyun joined them with his tray. "Did you see the morning drone footage?" R3 took down a massive predator that was approaching the station. Probably saved some of the external sensors from damage. "He's gotten big," Hana said with a mixture of pride and sadness. "They all have." "They're becoming legends," Taehyun continued. "The other alien species call them the Guardian Pack. Some of the younger scientists want to study them specifically because of their unusual behavior." Through the cafeteria window, Hana could see the planet's surface in the distance. Somewhere down there, 3 Ravenclaws were hunting, sleeping, living their lives. But they always came back to patrol near the station. They always protected the place where Hana worked. Captain Jiwoo found her later that day in the observation deck. He stood beside her, looking out at Velthar's rocky landscape. "You started something, you know," he said. "The galaxy is starting to understand what humanity really is. Not just soldiers or scientists or explorers, but caregivers, protectors of the vulnerable." "I just fed some hungry kids," Hana said. "You did more than that. You showed the galaxy what it means to be human, to see something vulnerable and choose to help, even at great personal cost, to form bonds across impossible divides, to turn predators into family. Hana was quiet for a moment. Do you think they're happy down there? I think they're exactly where they need to be. Healthy, strong, free, and close enough to check on the crazy human who saved them. Jiwoo smiled. The galaxy called us predators. They were right. But they didn't understand that we're predators who protect the young, even when it costs us everything. Especially when it costs us everything. That night, Hana stood at her quarters window and looked down at the planet's surface. In the darkness, she could sometimes see the cubs' glowing eyes reflecting the station's lights as they patrolled their territory. She placed her hand on the glass. Stay safe down there, she whispered. Far below, R3 paused in his patrol and looked up at the station, as if he could hear her. Then he resumed his rounds, keeping watch over the place where the human who had saved him still lived. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their tactics. It was their stubborn, irrational, beautiful insistence that children eat first, that the vulnerable deserve protection, and that family is not defined by species but by the bonds we choose to forge. And Hana, eating her full dinner while watching 3 Ravenclaws protect her home, finally understood that her sacrifice had never been weakness. It had been the most human thing she could have done.